In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only FTL. Greetings and welcome friends, I'm Ash, and let's begin by addressing the dreadnought in the room. Is Void War copying the homework of not only FTL, but also Warhammer 40k as a whole? And the answer is yes, absolutely. If you had told me this was an official Warhammer 40k themed expansion for FTL, I would not even bat an eye. It is that blatant. Do not take that as an insult, however. People doing their own twist on a popular and well-established formula is how genres evolve. If everyone didn't copy Half-Life, first-person shooters to this day would still have us running around collecting keys. So Void War taking notes from FTL and making something new and interesting out of them is perfectly fine in my book. The Warhammer 40k side of things though, that I do feel is a bit lazy. Again, using Warhammer 40k as a basis to create a new grimdark universe where everything and everyone sucks, that I would love, that is a great idea. But just copy-pasting the entire setting and only barely changing the names, that is just lame. Now, instead of the God Emperor, you have the God King. Instead of Khorne, you have a legally distinct blood god whose followers ride into battle in giant, vaguely phallic-shaped red starships. Instead of Space Marines, you have super powerful dudes wearing refrigerators for armor. Some, like the Inquisition, don't even get that much. They're literally just the Imperial Inquisition. The reason this stuck out to me so much is because Void War is not a lazy game by any stretch. Even the pre-launch demo I played was polished to a mirror sheen and had a great presentation. Sure, the visuals are simplistic, but they're full of charm. Grimy, dirty, gunmetal grey charm, but charm nonetheless. Even the music does an excellent job of sucking you into this world of misery and depravity by mostly alternating between droning ambient tracks and distorted combat music. It is a very solid foundation from which you could very easily build a unique and exciting universe. So having it all end up being Warhammer 40k but at home just feels like a massive waste of potential. At that point, why not just get an official license and make it a Warhammer 40k game? With that out of the way, let's get down to what actually really matters. What's the gameplay like and how does it differ from FTL? Well, your ship has a myriad of different systems, everything from weapons to life support, and all of them require power to run. The more you upgrade each individual piece of the ship, the more power it's going to need, and the more you'll need to upgrade your engines in order to keep up with demand. It is a very simple system, but it works well since you're never overflowing with money. Or in other words, you're never going to be able to have everything, so you'll have to make hard choices and steer your ship towards one of many different strategies, which then gives each run its own unique flavor. It is such a great system that Void War did very little to actually change it. Some of the weapons might be a bit more exotic than what you've seen in FTL, and the missiles now encompass all sorts of different effects, but the core of the experience is very much so the same. However, once we get to the crew members, things take a very drastic turn. In FTL, all crew members of a certain race are identical, while each faction in Void War has a variety of different unit types and tiers. For example, within the Empire, a husk is a cheap and disposable biomechanical abomination that can man your various ship systems, but is nearly worthless in an actual fight. An Imperial Enforcer, on the other hand, is a well-trained officer that can perform any task well, though they do not excel at anything in particular. Meanwhile, the super expensive Centurion, the Space Marine equivalent, is a walking bulldozer that can depopulate a good chunk of an enemy ship all on his own. My favorite type, however, is the Psyker, a generally frail character that can be equipped with all sorts of incredibly powerful magic. These range from damaging spells that can slice through an enemy ship or their crew, to more esoteric things like buffs that can make units more durable or enemies slower to react. And if you're really lucky, you can even find spells that let you do silly things like summon interdimensional demons straight into the enemy's weapons room. But wait, there's more. In order to differentiate all of these crew members even further, Void War lets you equip each one with a couple of pieces of gear, most of which does something unique and interesting. You can make characters more adept at fighting alone, which helps with infiltration missions, or you can make it so their attacks explode enemies and cause area damage, which is something that can completely change how you do boarding attacks, and more on that in just a moment. The catch is that equipment, and especially the good stuff, is quite rare and expensive. So if you want your away team to be geared to the teeth in the finest nightmares the far future can provide, you'll need to sacrifice some ship development in order to do so, which then makes each individual character feel a bit more special and important. And I really like that kind of stuff. Besides having them sit around looking pretty, you can also slam upwards of 4 characters, depending on upgrades, into a breaching pod and send them to any room in the opponent's ship that borders the outside. Once there, they'll start fighting whatever is nearby, and if left alone, they will start smashing sensitive machinery in order to cripple the enemy ship. And if they need a bit more help, you can also utilize psychers on your own ship to give them magical support from afar. Because of this, and because of how powerful some of these crew members can become, close quarters combat in Void War is a lot more important than in FTL. It's a lot more fun as well, since you have a lot more options and more specialized characters to do it with. In fact, my favorite one was the one where I dedicated myself to the Blood God and completely ignored my ship's arsenal. Not only could they make a mockery of anyone that dared stand in their way, but they were also able to liberate any loot stashes found on the enemy ships within seconds, and in the process keep the whole war machine well fueled. Naturally, this sort of thing always comes with a degree of risk. Characters can die before you're able to pull them out. And even if they don't, it can often be hard to fully heal them. Unless you invested a fair bit of currency into the healing station or a restoration-focused psyker, all you'll have is a small bit of passive healing every time your ship makes a move on the galactic map. And you know what? I think that's a great idea. It adds an interesting layer of tension and decision-making to the close quarters combat, but without making it annoying or overly difficult. Same story goes with the demon-possessed ships. These contain no atmosphere, so your crew members will instantly start choking once they enter. And while they do not have particularly powerful enemies in them, the demons don't ever seem to stop coming either. This is where I learned that it is very important to have a somewhat balanced ship, because sooner or later you're going to encounter enemies that directly counter you, and how you survive this will be what truly defines your run. So even if you end up with the biggest, baddest guns in all of known space, do make sure to have at least a couple of characters that have seen an axe at some point in their lives. It might just save your life once demons suddenly appear onto your ship. Speaking of guns, let's talk about the ship-to-ship combat. Do you remember FTL? If you do, it is exactly like that, just with different flavors of weapons. Each ship has a shield that blocks a certain amount of shots based on its upgrade level. Once you pop the bubble, you'll be able to damage the individual components underneath. The more damage a system has taken, the less functional it is, so with a bit of careful focus, you can completely cripple an enemy ship. Once this happens, you'll want to seize the opportunity and destroy the opponent as quickly as possible, since each individual system can be repaired. As such, any hole in the enemy's defenses will only stay open for a very, very short amount of time. If you find yourself in a stalemate, you can also use missiles to cause all sorts of havoc. You can create massive holes, turn an opponent's crew into minced meat, and use a laser that carves directly through their hull and sends all of the resources to you. It is very, very powerful stuff, but it does come at a cost. Unlike regular weapons that simply need to be powered to fire, missiles require munitions which are a very limited resource, so a little bit of thought is required when using them. However, unlike FTL, where each missile launcher is its own weapon with its own power requirements, in Void War all missiles are launched from a special ship system that only takes a small bit of power to run. This makes them a lot more approachable and, in my opinion, a lot more interesting as well. Since you don't have to worry about wasting power or space, you can pack your ship with all sorts of weird and specialized missiles, which again really helps give each run its own unique flavor. This whole combat system worked amazingly in FTL, and unsurprisingly, it is just as good in Void War. It is super simple to get into, yet with enough depth and complexity that it remains interesting even after multiple playthroughs. Doubly so when you consider that there is a ton of things to unlock and spice up your runs with. New ships with all sorts of new variants, new commanders with their own unique abilities and playstyles, and, perhaps most importantly of all, 12 different difficulty levels. Once you're done with all of the fighting, you'll have to make a move on the randomly generated star map that is, unsurprisingly, once again inspired by FTL. As you travel around, you'll encounter all sorts of random events that range from hostile or friendly ships all the way to weird relics that require you to make a choice about their fate. Much like FTL, characters can sometimes give you an advantage when dealing with events if the topic at hand happens to be something they're experienced with. It's nothing major, but it is a fun addition that encourages you to run a diverse crew, and that is something I greatly appreciate. You can also encounter a surprisingly large variety of vendors that you can either attempt to pillage for loot or trade with in order to unlock all sorts of different upgrades, weapons, magic, or crew members. There is a staggering amount of choices to be made, and a very limited amount of currency to do them with, so you'll have to buy only a few select pieces and leave the rest of the toys for future runs. That said, if you really want to go all in on a certain theme, Void War makes this possible by letting you dedicate yourself to a certain faction, which then makes more of their units and gear appear throughout the game. Again, it is a very simple yet very welcome addition. However, what I find very strange is that Void War didn't copy any of FTL's constraints when it comes to the star map. There is no rebel fleet chasing you down, and you don't even have to worry about fuel. It's just a straight shot from the beginning of the sector to the very end, which in my eyes feels like a bit of a missed opportunity. It's possible higher difficulty options will do something about this, and I certainly hope they do, but it is a surprisingly weird omission for a game that has otherwise taken FTL and just kinda built upon it. Whether Void War is better or worse than FTL is likely going to be fiercely debated for many months. Personally, I consider Void War to be a complement to FTL rather than a replacement. It offers a new and interesting perspective, as well as a much different atmosphere, so I can definitely see myself continuing to play both. As such, if you're a fan of FTL, or strategy-focused roguelikes in general, I think I can very comfortably recommend you give Void War a try. And especially the free demo, as you can very easily get 5 to 6 hours out of it without ever getting bored. I hope you enjoy, and just as a little personal note at the very end, if you know any games similar to FTL, let me know in the comments. I'm in a bit of a space roguelike kind of mood right now, and there just doesn't seem to be all that many games out there that scratch that sort of itch. So if you have a good one, please be nice and share with the class. Thank you guys for watching, and if you enjoyed this, or even if you didn't, please do let me know. If you'd like to see more, make sure to subscribe, hit the stupid bell, pet your favorite legally distinct space marine, and do whatever other nonsense you gotta do these days. Thank you for sticking to the very end, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye bye!